Jeff, help us understand, because the United States is now pausing all military aid to Ukraine. And at the same time, Reuters, your organization, is reporting that the White House is considering lifting sanctions on Russia, including some oligarchs. Explain all this to us.
Well, I think the explanation, Steph, is that these are just the next steps in President Trump's effort and his administration's efforts to get closer to Moscow. And the fact that they're considering, according to my colleague Aaron's reporting, lifting sanctions will be hugely welcomed in Russia, whose economy could absolutely use the extra help. And as far as pausing aid to Ukraine, you've heard President Trump, both as a candidate, particularly as a candidate, and use the word retribution. And you've seen his the first 6 weeks of his second term, absolutely employ that governing philosophy on multiple levels. Well, that's being employed here too, with regard to Ukraine. He's upset about the way the Oval Office meeting went. Both he and Vice President Vance feel that the president of Ukraine, President Zelensky, should have been more grateful. And they're taking it out with a policy decision on aid, some of which has already been pre-approved by the previous administration.
Susan, can you dig into this for us? Yes. Volodymyr Zelensky on Friday, I wouldn't say had his dukes up, but he was definitely defending his country. It's a flat out lie that Vice President Vance has said he never said thank you. He clearly said thank you on Friday, as he has said many, many other times. But the White House is still pushing this argument that Zelensky hasn't been grateful enough, hasn't shown enough gratitude. That's why they're doing this.
Beth, I think this is a clear-cut example of the White House being very, very untruthful. And the record is very clear that Trump's pivot toward Russia and away from our commitments to Ukraine and our partnership with Ukraine was already unfolding well before the fight erupted in the Oval Office at J.D. Vance's instigation. I mean, I think that, Donald Trump already ordered his delegate to the United Nations to vote with Russia and North Korea and Belarus against Ukraine and our Western allies days earlier, on the third anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion. You mentioned in your report the Pentagon seeming to stand down on offensive cyber capabilities looking at Russia well before this visit. Trump already ordered Ukraine essentially to pay a punitive $500 billion deal and became enraged when Zelensky didn't sign it weeks earlier. Donald Trump never been a supporter, really, of Ukraine's. This is not the first time that he has held up aid to Ukraine. In fact, go back to 2019 and his first impeachment, which was all about Donald Trump holding up aid to Ukraine because he was demanding that Zelensky investigate Trump's domestic political enemies. So, it seems that the fight on Friday was a fight that the White House very much wanted to have because it goes along with a major geopolitical policy shift that was already underway and well in train by the Trump White House. But it's a very, very significant shift. And I'll tell you, I never thought I would hear the Kremlin say that the White House and the President of the United States have adopted Vladimir Putin's geopolitical views. It's a stunning moment.
Okay, Susan, then to that point, when you hear the Kremlin, right, say, yep, Donald Trump's foreign policy is in line with Russia's vision. I saw on Twitter earlier, Gary Kasparov posed the question, if Vladimir Putin himself were in the White House, what would he be doing different?
We were just having this conversation, which is find me an aspect of Donald Trump's foreign policy right now that isn't something that's welcomed by the Kremlin. And by the way, that includes the tariffs that I know you're going to talk about later that Trump is threatening to impose in less than 1 hour from now on our closest neighbors and allies, Canada and Mexico. It includes the rift with our closest allies in Europe, the European Union, Britain standing against us. We're threatening Canada, for God's sakes. These are things that bring joy to Vladimir Putin's heart. Donald Trump tried when he first came into office in 2017 to lift sanctions on Russia and was constrained by Republicans up on Capitol Hill, including the then still living John McCain. I think it's a sign of how far the Republican Party has become Donald Trump's Republican Party, that even in 2018, when Trump met with Putin in Helsinki, there actually was quite an outcry. There was even, public pushback from members of Trump's own administration, as well as Republicans on Capitol Hill. Now, what Trump has done in the last few days, in the middle of an active, deadly war in Ukraine, that's the deadliest war since World War II, that's far more serious than the words that he said in Helsinki. And yet we've seen literally almost nothing from any members of Donald Trump's party. And I think that's a sign of how far we've spiraled as a country. But the stakes couldn't be higher now, because it's not just words, but very, very disruptive acts that we're in the middle of from the Trump White House only 6 weeks in.
So, Leanne, take us to Capitol Hill, right? Think about all those Republicans who pushed back when all it was sort of Donald Trump whispering sweet nothings to Vladimir Putin in Helsinki. Now it's massive policy changes. Where are those Republicans in Congress now? What are they saying?
Most of them who are actually saying things are backing the president. The ones who are uncomfortable with this are not saying a lot. You can look specifically at Speaker Mike Johnson, who just less than a year ago was willing to give up his job as Speaker to provide $60 billion of aid for Ukraine, something that was becoming more politically unpopular within his party. And now he is continuing to deride Zelensky, stand up for Donald Trump and his policies. And so that's just one really critical example. And when Donald Trump is giving his address to Congress tomorrow night, I am super fascinated to see what Trump says about Ukraine, if he repeats the inaccurate lie that Ukraine started this war, and if he does, how Republicans respond to that in this chamber in front of him. So I think that tomorrow is going to be a huge eye-opening moment for the party, depending on what Donald Trump says and how his own party responds to him.
Leanne, I think we might be wearing the same sweater. You know what that means? No more questions for you. Jeff, it's going beyond
Send
that.
them all to me.
Okay, you know what? I'm definitely not wearing the same outfit you are. Vladimir Putin would love to see Zelensky out of office, forced out, stepped down. And now it actually seems like some American leaders are saying that. Mike Johnson suggested Ukraine might need a new president. What do you think?
Yeah, I wrote a story about this on Sunday. You're hearing that kind of started with Lindsey Graham. Senator Graham spoke to reporters at the White House on Friday after the president's meeting in the Oval Office and suggested that he didn't know if the United States could work with Zelensky anymore. Then that was echoed by others on the Sunday shows, including Speaker Johnson, and sort of hinted at as well by National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. So there seems to be a growing push from the Republican Party and allies anyway of President Trump to push Zelensky or to pressure Zelensky to either change his position on peace with Russia and on the United States' view of the whole situation, or to leave.